This game was pulled from stores in 2004 after a lawsuit involving an underage contestant. So why did I find it being sold at a gaming convention just last month? The Guy Game, still here, still being sold, still making people uncomfortable 20 years later. Same convention, different seller, different year, same product that was supposed to disappear. And every time someone spots it, the reaction is predictable. This shouldn't be here. How is this still legal to sell? Didn't this get banned? Well, no, it didn't get banned. It got pulled by its own publisher after they'd realized they'd accidentally included footage of a 17-year-old contestant. But the game itself, the physical copies, they're still out there, still changing hands, still generating controversy. But this isn't another video about why the Guy Game was problematic. You already know that. This is about the two men who made it happen. Because someone had to greenlight this project. Someone had to fund it. Someone had to look at this concept and think it was worth their time and money. Jeff Spangenberg, gaming industry veteran, successful entrepreneur, and the man who said yes to the Guy Game. Matt Sadler, working comedian, the face of the project, the guy who actually hosted this thing. Two careers, two different industries, one shared legacy they probably wish they could forget. My name is mrixrt, my YouTube channel is really cool, and this is how they got here. This is what happened next. And this is why you can still buy their mistake at a retro gaming convention today. Jeff Spangenberg didn't start as a guy who made controversial games, he started as a guy who made hit games. Spangenberg skipped college entirely to learn programming. By the early 90s, he was running his own development studio, Iguana Entertainment, cranking out games that people actually wanted to play. Turok, Dinosaur Hunter, NFL Quarterback Club, Arrow the Acrobat. These weren't just games, they were franchises. Iguana was making the kind of money that gets publishers interested in buyouts. And in 1995, that's exactly what happened. Acclaim Entertainment bought Iguana, and Spangenberg found himself promoted to an executive position overseeing all of Acclaim software studios. He was successful, wealthy, and had serious industry credibility. Then, in 1998, Acclaim fired him. The details are messy. Breach of contract, fraud allegations, a lawsuit that dragged on for 2 years before settling out of court. But the important part is this. Jeff Spangenberg, successful gaming entrepreneur, suddenly found himself unemployed and very angry at his former employer. So, what does a fired gaming executive do? Start over. In October 1998, Spangenberg founded Retro Studios with backing from Nintendo of America. The plan was ambitious. Nintendo wanted mature games for their upcoming GameCube console. Spangenberg promised to be their American equivalent of Rare. 40,000 square feet in Austin, Texas. Motion capture stage, top-tier talent poached from everywhere. Valve, id Software, LucasArts. 4 launch titles. A football game, a car combat game, an RPG called Raven Blade, and an action-adventure title. It should have been perfect. It wasn't. By 2000, none of the 4 games were working. Teams were missing milestones, projects were getting scrapped and restarted, and Spangenberg, he was increasingly absent from his own company. When he did show up, it wasn't to fix problems. Former employees recall him rolling into the parking lot in expensive cars, Ferraris, luxury vehicles, while his teams were working brutal hours on projects that were going nowhere. Then Nintendo of Japan visited, and they hated everything they saw. Shigeru Miyamoto saw one thing he liked: the action-adventure game's engine. He suggested Retro use it to make a new Metroid game. Everything else got cancelled. Half the company got laid off. And Jeff Spangenberg, well, Nintendo discovered he'd been using company servers to host a website called Sinful Summer, basically a photo gallery of pool parties at his house featuring topless women. This did not align with Nintendo's family-friendly image. In May 2002, Nintendo bought out Spangenberg's stake in the company for $1 million. He was gone. Retro Studios went on to make Metroid Prime, one of the greatest games ever made, without him. So there's Jeff Spangenberg in 2002, fired from Acclaim, pushed out of Retro, wealthy, but with a reputation for being unreliable and inappropriate. Most people would have retired quietly. Jeff Spangenberg started a new company called Top Heavy Studios, and decided to make a game about spring break and topless women. In the early 2000s, Matt Sadler was grinding it out on Austin's comedy circuit, and Austin at that time was a very specific kind of comedy scene. Sadler had been doing stand-up for about 15 years by then, working the open mics, the showcases, the thankless gigs that every comedian knows. He was part of a generation of Austin comics who had cut their teeth at places like the Velveeta Room and the Laugh Stop. This wasn't clean, family-friendly comedy. Austin's scene in the early 2000s was edgy, experimental, and often deliberately provocative. Comics were pushing boundaries, trying weird stuff, playing to rooms full of other comedians who would heckle mercilessly if you weren't bringing something new. Sadler was known for his willingness to try anything. Other comics from that era remember him doing bizarre performance art pieces, interacting with props, and breaking the wall in ways that make traditional stand-up look tame. But here's the thing about being a working comedian in Austin in 2003. You took the gigs that paid. Sadler wasn't headlining major clubs or getting HBO specials. He was a solid, experienced comic looking for opportunities. When someone approached him about hosting an interactive game show, it probably seemed like exactly the kind of weird, experimental project that fit his style. Comedy hosting gigs weren't uncommon. Lots of comics did corporate events, game shows, anything that paid the bills. And the project itself, well, it wasn't that different from the kind of boundary-pushing comedy that was happening in Austin clubs every night. The only difference was that this time it was going on a video game instead of a comedy stage. 2004 was the perfect year for the Guy Game to exist. Not 1994, not 2014, 2004, because that was when several cultural forces aligned in exactly the right way to make this project seem not just viable, but inevitable. First, you had Girls Gone Wild at its absolute peak. They were making tens of millions of dollars selling videos of college women exposing themselves on spring break. Late night TV was wall-to-wall commercials for these tapes. It was a proven business model with a massive audience. Second, the gaming industry was desperately trying to prove it wasn't just for kids anymore. Grand Theft Auto was pushing violence boundaries. BMX XXX had already tried the extreme sports plus nudity angle. Publishers were actively looking for ways to market to adult men. Third, reality television was in its shock phase. Fear Factor was making people eat bugs. Joe Millionaire was about lying to women for money. The entire entertainment industry was in a race to see who could be more outrageous. And fourth, and this is crucial, the internet wasn't what it is today. High-speed internet was still relatively new. Streaming video was primitive. If you wanted to see Girls Gone Wild style content, you still had to buy physical media or watch cable TV. So from Jeff Spangenberg's perspective, the Guy Game made perfect business sense. You had a proven content model, combined with an interactive gaming element that could justify a higher price point than a simple video. Think about it. A Girls Gone Wild tape cost maybe $20 and you watched it once. A video game cost $40 and provided hours of interactive entertainment. You could play trivia, compete with friends, unlock content progressively. It was a more sophisticated product for a more sophisticated audience. From Matt Sadler's perspective, it was a hosting gig. He was a professional comedian being paid to do what he did every night anyway. Entertain an audience, keep energy up, make people laugh. The fact that the content was risque wasn't particularly shocking to someone who'd spent 15 years in comedy clubs. Neither man was operating in a vacuum. They were both responding to market forces and cultural trends that made this project seem not just acceptable, but smart. The actual filming happened during spring break 2003 on South Padre Island, Texas. Spangenberg's crew set up to film what was essentially a Girls Gone Wild style production, but with Sadler as the host, asking trivia questions instead of just encouraging women to flash the camera. Sadler wasn't just the host. He was credited as one of the game's designers and the writer. His comedy background shaped the tone of the entire project. The game's humor, its interaction with participants, its whole persona, that was Matt Sadler. The process was straightforward. Approach college girls at spring break parties, ask them to participate in filming for a trivia game, sign a release, and if they got the questions wrong, encourage them to remove their tops. Participants were paid $20. They were supposed to provide valid ID proving they were over 18. They signed releases agreeing to appear in the game and promotional materials. But in the chaos of spring break, with drunk college girls and a party atmosphere, the age verification process wasn't as thorough as it should have been. One participant provided a fake ID. She was 17 years old. Nobody knew it at the time. The footage was edited, the game was completed, and it shipped to stores in August 2004. For 4 months, the Guy game was exactly what Spangenberg and Sadler intended. A commercially available, interactive version of Girls Gone Wild. Before we get to the lawsuit that ended everything, it's important to understand that the Guy game was already a failure. Even without legal issues, this was a product that simply didn't work. The reviews were brutal. Metacritic scores of 47 and 48 out of 100. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave it a 2.5 out of 30 in a review that might win an award for review that holds up the least 20 years later. Xbox Nation gave it a 0. PC Gamer scores it 20%. These weren't reviews criticizing the concept. These were reviews saying the game itself was broken, boring, and pointless. The criticism was consistent across every publication. The trivia questions were either insultingly easy or impossibly obscure. The minigames were poorly designed and confusing. The interactive elements were tedious. Even reviewers who were sympathetic to the concept said it was too much guesswork to see the goods. But the most damning criticism was that it simply wasn't fun. Commercially, it was equally disastrous. The Guy game sold only 60 to 80,000 copies total. Spangenberg invested $1.4 million into the project. Even at $40 per copy, they would have needed to sell 250,000 copies just to break even on production costs, not counting marketing, distribution, or retailer cuts. So when the lawsuit hit in December 2004, the Guy game wasn't a successful product being destroyed by legal issues. It was a commercial and critical failure about to become a legal nightmare. 4 months after the game's release, an anonymous plaintiff filed a lawsuit against Top Heavy Studios, gathering of developers, Sony, and Microsoft. The facts were straightforward and damning. During the spring break filming, a 17-year-old had participated in the filming. She had provided fake identification showing she was 21, signed a release form using the false name from her fake ID, and appeared in the game exposing herself on camera. The girl's brother had seen the game and told her she was in it. She had no idea her footage was being used in a commercial video game, its promotional materials, or the company's website. She thought she was participating in a one-time spring break contest for $20. Her lawyers argued 3 points. First, as a minor, she legally could not consent to appear in the game, making her release form void. Second, Top Heavy had been negligent in their age verification process. And third, she was being exploited commercially without valid consent. Top Heavy's defense was that the girl had committed fraud by providing fake identification and lying about her age. They argued they had reasonable security measures in place and had relied justifiably on her misrepresentation. But there was a problem with Top Heavy's defense. The court documents revealed that the fake ID was obviously suspicious. The expiration date didn't match the birth date. The zip code she provided was for a different city. The street address didn't exist. Her release form had scratch-outs where she'd started to write her real information. Jeff Spangenberg himself testified that if he had known about these inconsistencies, he would have been suspicious and attempted to verify her information, but they hadn't checked. The verification process had failed completely. A Travis County judge granted a temporary injunction prohibiting any further distribution of the Guy game. The ruling was upheld on appeal to the Texas 3rd District Court of Appeals. The court found that the plaintiff had a probable right to recovery and that continued distribution would cause irreparable harm. This injunction effectively killed the game. No more copies could be manufactured or distributed. The case was eventually settled privately out of court. The terms were never disclosed, but the damage was done. The Guy game was permanently banned from sale, and any remaining copies became illegal to distribute. Interestingly, the court did not resolve whether Top Heavy had produced child pornography under Texas law. The injunction was based on privacy violations and commercial misappropriation, not obscenity charges. But the implication was clear. The game contained footage that should never have been distributed. For Jeff Spangenberg, the lawsuit marked the complete end of his career in the gaming industry. After the settlement, Top Heavy Studios simply ceased to exist. There was no press release, no final statement, no attempt to salvage the company or pivot to other projects. And Spangenberg himself, he vanished from the gaming world entirely. No interviews, no new companies, no attempts to return to the industry that had made him wealthy. The man who had created successful franchises like Turok and had founded Retro Studios, the company that went on to make Metroid Prime without him, simply disappeared from public view. Today, Wikipedia lists Jeff Spangenberg as retired. His last video game credit is The Guy Game in 2004. No subsequent projects, no industry appearances, no presence at gaming conferences or events. For someone who had been a prominent figure in gaming for over 15 years, the silence has been absolute. It's likely he's living comfortably off his previous successes. The buyouts from Acclaim and Nintendo, combined with royalties from successful games like Turok, probably provide a comfortable retirement. But it's a retirement forced by scandal rather than chosen. Matt Sadler's story is different but equally limiting. He wasn't sued personally, faced no legal consequences, and technically did nothing illegal. He was a comedian hired to host a video game. But the Guy game became his primary claim to fame. Today, Sadler is still performing stand-up comedy. He appears regularly at Austin venues like the Moon Tower Festival and small clubs around Texas. His bio describes him as a veteran performer who headlines comedy clubs all over the US and Canada, though the evidence suggests these are smaller venues, not major comedy clubs or television appearances. His IMDb page lists exactly 3 credits, all from the Guy game: writer, actor, and additional video editing. 20 years after the scandal, it remains the only notable thing he's done that anyone outside Austin's local comedy scene would recognize. In many ways, Sadler's career represents the more common outcome for working comedians, grinding it out at small venues, building a local following, but never breaking through to national recognition. The difference is that, for most comedians, their biggest credit isn't a legal scandal. Both men paid a price for the Guy game, but very different prices. Spangenberg lost an entire industry and retreated from public life. Sadler kept working, but his career was forever defined by a project that became a cautionary tale. And yet, 20 years later, the Guy game is still out there. Still being sold at conventions, still circulating in online marketplaces, still generating controversy whenever it surfaces. Because the story doesn't end with the lawsuit, or the settlement, or the personal consequences for the people who made it. Which brings us back to where we started. The gaming convention I mentioned at the beginning, where I found the Guy game being sold not once, but twice. Different vendors, same convention, same uncomfortable reality. The game keeps surfacing. In 2024, it appeared for sale at the Too Many Games convention in Pennsylvania for $250. When people pointed out the legal issues, it was quietly removed from the vendor's booth. The next year, it appeared at Too Many Games again, this time for $150. And this time, when exhibitors were informed about it, they put it right back out on the floor for sale again. It'll appear again somewhere else. It always does. Gaming collectors discuss it in forums with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Is the Guy game rare? Asks one poster. I don't want to play this game, they clarify. I'm just wondering if it's rare or not, and how much the game would fetch. That's the modern reality of the Guy game. It exists in a gray market of gaming curiosity. People who want to own a piece of controversial gaming history even if they'd never actually play it. It's become a museum piece, but one that contains actual footage of exploitation. What's most striking about the Guy game's persistence is the complete silence from the people who created it. Jeff Spangenberg has never given an interview about the project. Matt Sadler has never publicly discussed his involvement. Both men have simply moved on and said nothing. There's been no accountability, no reflection, no acknowledgement of what went wrong, no industry analysis about how to prevent similar situations, no discussion about the ethics of the production process or the responsibilities of content creators. The gaming industry largely forgot the Guy game existed, except when it surfaces at conventions and generates awkward headlines. There were no policy changes, no industry guidelines, no soul-searching about how something like this could happen. And perhaps that's the most troubling legacy of the Guy game. Not just that it was made, but that its creation taught the industry nothing. The same cultural forces that made it seem viable in 2004, the pursuit of shock value, the rush to capture adult markets, the willingness to push boundaries without considering consequences, those forces are still there. 20 years later, the Guy game serves as a perfect case study in how not to make entertainment, how good intentions and market logic can lead to exploitation, how the pursuit of edgy content can cross lines that should never be crossed, and how the consequences of those decisions can last far longer than anyone involved ever intended. Jeff Spangenberg wanted to make a successful video game. Matt Sadler wanted a paying comedy gig. Neither men set out to exploit anyone or create a legal scandal, but that's exactly what happened when two different entertainment industries collided at exactly the wrong cultural moment. It's still out there, still being sold, still generating controversy, and it seems that it will remain what it's always been. A cautionary tale that no one wants to learn from. Thank you so much to my patrons for supporting this video, and I'll see you on the next one.